Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. We are going to learn about methods. In this first part of the topic, we will learn about what is a method, how to define it, calling it within other methods, and also the different types of variables that Java has. This is simply a brief introduction, as you will learn about this in more detail in Programming 2 next semester. What is a method? A method is a group of statements that exist within a program for the purpose of performing a specific task. Most programs are large enough to be broken down into several subtasks. Each method is assigned to perform a specific subtask because it is easier to tackle smaller tasks individually. For example, what we have seen so far is writing everything within our main method. Say that we want to write a calculator program. It works fine even if we put everything within the main method. However, it can be messy and difficult when we have hundreds or thousands of lines of code. Think of it as separating it into one part for addition, another part for subtraction, and another part for multiplication. What are the advantages of having methods? We can have simpler code because a program that contains several small methods are easier to read than one long sequence of statements within the main method. We can also reuse the code instead of duplicating and rewriting the same part several times. By having methods, we can call a method many times whenever it is needed in any part of the program. We can avoid code redundancy. It also makes it easier to manage the code and test it, as we can test each method separately. So it is easier to isolate and fix the errors. This means when we add more codes in different methods, we do not need to modify existing methods as we have checked its validity before. Also, by having methods, it is easier to share the workload as different programmers can be assigned different methods to write. To create a method, you need to write its definition. The complete codes that consist of the method header and body is known as a method definition. A method must be defined first before it can be called. To execute the method that has been defined, you will need to write a statement that calls it. The statement that contains a method's name to call the method is known as method call. When a method is called, the statements in the method's body are executed. Then, execution jumps back and returns to the part of the program that called the method and resumes execution at that point. We are going to look at some examples to make sense of this. Let's first look at how to draw the flowchart when we have a method. When flowcharting a program with methods, a method call is shown with a rectangle that has vertical bars at each side. Within it, we will write the method name. In this figure, we have the start or main method. Then we have an output that displays I have a message for you. Next is a method called showMessage in a rectangle with vertical bars at each side. At this point, the method is called and the statements within the method is executed. It then returns back to the main method and continues with the output here that displays that's all folks and ends this program. The definition of a method is done in a separate flowchart. For the flowchart for the method, the starting terminal symbol usually shows the name of the method. The ending terminal symbol for all methods shows return because it marks the point where the computer returns to the part of the program that called the method. Here is an example of the call to a method within the main method, and at the right part is the flowchart of the method called showMessage. At the showMessage, instead of writing start and stop at the beginning, which is also in an oval, circle, or rounded rectangle, we will write the method name. Then, similar as before, statements or any calculations that the method will do will be drawn as part of the flowchart. For example here, in showMessage, it has an output to display hello world. At the end of it, we have to write return so that it will go back to the main method and continues with the rest of the statement within the main method. Let's go through the flow of this flowchart. It first starts the program and executes the main method. Here you can write start as usual instead of min. Then we have an output to display I have a message for you. Next, it invokes a method called showMessage. It goes to the start of the showMessage method. See here that the shape of it is the rounded rectangle. In the showMessage method, what it does here is output the sentence hello world. Then, it will return back to the main method that calls showMessage method. Back in the main method, it continues and executes the statements after the method call, which is to display that's all folks. The program then ends. So based on the step-by-step flow, you can see what happened when we have the method call. It will go straight to the method and returns back to the main method or the caller once the statements within the other methods has finished. This figure here shows an example of a hierarchy chart. A hierarchy chart gives a visual representation of the relationship between methods. The details of the program are excluded. In a program, we can have as many methods as needed. We can also call a method within another method. For example here, in the main method, it calls getInput method. Within the getInput method, it calls getHoursWorked method and also getHourlyPayRate method. So within the getInput, it calls two methods. This slide here is showing a class called hello2 that has two methods called min, which we are familiar with, and another method called showMessage. Within the main method, we call the showMessage method, where in showMessage method, it displays hello world using the system.out.println. Let's go through the method definition step by step. Method definition always contains two parts, a header and also a body. A header, which is the starting point of the method. A body contains all statements to perform the method's task. An example of a complete method header is public static void showMessage. The method body can be any statement, for example, system.out.println hello world. Going back to the header, the syntax of the method header is we need to write the modifier such as public static, then the return type, which can be void, double, int, char, boolean, and other types. Then only the method name such as main, showMessage, or any name. The rule for the method name is the same as the rule for any identifier. The last part in the method header is a bracket, which can contain formal parameters. For example here, we have public static void showMessage and the brackets. Public static is the modifiers. Void means that there is no return type. It can be int, double, or other type. ShowMessage is the name of the method, and the brackets is to list the formal parameters. It can be left blank if there is no parameter. The method header is followed by the method body. Within the body, we can declare and initialize local variables, do any kind of calculations, and anything else that we have been doing within our main method. In this example, we have string name equal to Ali, where name is a local variable. This means that the variable name is only known within showMessage method. It is created each time the method is called and destroyed when it finishes executing. In all of the codes that we have been writing, we have been using local variables. What is a local variable? A local variable is the variable that is declared inside a method and cannot be accessed by statements that are outside of the method. Variables within the same method must have different names. For example, we have declared some variables within our main method. To enable the variable to be accessible by all methods, we need to have global variables. Depending on what you want your program to do, you might want to consider using global variables. However, it needs to be used carefully as methods that are dependent on global variables if one method changes the value of the variable, it will affect other methods as well. Let's look at this example where we compare the different types of variables. Here we have a class called variables. Below the class definition, we have three variables called static int number, static string word, and static char letter. We say that these variables are static, meaning that this belongs to the class. You can think of this as the global variables. Next, we have int number 2, string word 2, and char letter 2. When we do not have the keyword static in front of it, these are known as the instance variable. Instance variable would belong to specific object. We will look at how to call and use these variables later. Within the main method, we have the local variables called int number, string word, and char letter. These variables are only known within the main method. For local variables, we need to initialize them to some values. Otherwise, when we try to compile them, it will give an error. Static variables and instance variables have some default values. For example, int has the default value of 0 and double is 0.0, so we do not need to initialize them. Within the main method, we have several system.out.println where we want to display the value of the variables. Then we call my method, and within my method, it displays the value of the variables called number, word, and letter. What do you think will be displayed? Remember that as we have the static variables, all the static variables can be accessed by all methods in this class. When we run this code, the output is, within the main method, number has the value of 4, word is hello, and the letter is A. In my method, the output is number is 0, word is null, and letter is 0000. Why do they have different values? If we look at the main method, the local variables have the same name as the static variables. When they have the same name, local variables take priority within the method. In my method, as there are no local variables, number, word, and letter refers to the static variables. As mentioned previously, static variables have default values, where here we can see that int is 0, string is null, and char is 0000. What should we do if we want to refer to the static variables within the main method when we also have the local variables? We can refer to the static variables by writing the class name dot static variable name. For example, as highlighted in yellow here, variables.number, variables.word, and variables.letter, because our class here is called as variables. In my method, we do not have to write class name.static variable name because it does not contain any local variables. However, if we want to write it as variables.number, variables.word, and variables.letter, we can. It doesn't make any difference to the output. When we run this code, the output that we will get is, in both methods, number is 0, word is null, and letter is 0000. Let's remove the local variables and only look at the static variables. In the main method, we first display the number, word, and letter using system.out.println. Then, as highlighted in green, we reassign new values to all the variables where number is equal to 99, word is hello, and letter is R. On the next line, we call my method. What do you think will be displayed within my method? What is the value of number, word, and letter? When we run this code, the values of number, word, and letter in my method are different than the values in the main method. Why do you think this happened? Remember that static variables belong to the class. This means any changes to the static variables at any method, it will affect the values. So here, as we have changed the value of number, word, and letter within the main method, When my method invokes those variables, the variables' values have already been changed. Be careful if you choose to use static variables so that the values that you get are as expected. Let's go back and look at instance variable. As mentioned previously, instance variable belongs to an instance or an object. We cannot access instance variables directly, so we have to firstly create an object of the class. We will just briefly look at this as you will learn in more detail about object in programming too. Instance variables are variables that we declared below the class name. It does not have the word static in front of it. In main method, to access the instance variable, we create an object of the class variables called v by writing variables v equal to new variables. When we have the new keyword, that means we are creating an object. This is the same as what we have seen in string, where we can have string s equal to new string, meaning that we are creating an object of a string. Once we have created the object, to get the value of the instance variable, we can write object.instance variable, such as v.number2, v.word2, and v.letter2. Similarly, within my method, it needs to create an object to use the instance variables. Here we have variables a equal to new variables. We can call our object as v if we want, because within different method, those are only local within the method itself. Here we access the instance variable by writing a.number2, a.word2, and a.letter2. When we run this code, the output that we get are number is 0, word is null, and letter is 0000, because instance variables, they have the default values. What do you think the output will be when we have, as highlighted in blue here, v.number equal to 99, v.word equal to hello, and v.letter equal to r? The output is still the same as before, because the new reassigned values only would affect the v object in the main method. Object v and object a are two separate objects. Even though they are using the instance variable, they are separate things because they are two objects. Going back to the method topic, how to call a method. The syntax of it is class name dot method name, then the parameter if there is any. For example, for a class called hello2 and has a method called showMessage, we can write it as hello2.showMessage. Another example we have used and seen, maths.power2,5, where maths is the class name and power is the method in the maths class. If we want to call the method within the same class, we do not need to write the class name. For example, instead of hello2.showMessage, we can write showMessage, which is calling the method by its name straight away. By making the method call, it will invoke the method. Within the hello2 class, showMessage can be called by the method name. If we are in another class other than hello2, to invoke showMessage, we have to write the class name, which is hello2, and then .showMessage. This basically means we want to call showMessage method that is contained within the hello2 class. Think of it as the path to find the method. Let's look at this example for method call. We have a class called myClass and three methods called myMethod1, main, and myMethod2. Here you can see that it does not matter where we write our method. It can be before or after the main method. Within our class, we have a static variable called number1. And within the methods, we have local variable called number2 that have different values in different methods. These variables, even though they have the same name, they do not overlap as only the method where they are declared knows about it. In myMethod1, number2 is 12. In main method, number2 is 15. and in my method 2, number 2 is 6. Within the main method, my method 1 and my method 2 can be invoked by calling the method name. They can also be called by writing the class name, which is myClass.myMethod1 and myClass.myMethod2. As they are in the same class, it is optional to write the class name. When we run this code, the main method is executed as the first method. It displays main and the value of number 1, which is 0, and number 2, which is its local variable, the value 15. Then, it calls my method 1 that displays number 1 as 0 and number 2 that is its local variable, the value 12. The next line in the main method is the call to my method 2. It displays my method 2, number 1 is 0, and number 2, which is my method 2 local variable, the value 6. Then we have myClass.myMethod1, which is the same call as before, but here we use the class name, which shows the value 0 and 12. It has the same output as what we saw earlier. The same goes to myClass.myMethod2, which we can call the method as myMethod2 without the class name. It displays 0 and 6. What if we have two classes? Here we have two classes called myClass and class2. In myClass, it has the main method. In class2, it has two methods called myMethod1 and myMethod2. In the main method within myClass, it will call myMethod1 and myMethod2. Do you think that we can call those methods by writing the method name? If we write myMethod1 and then myMethod2, this will give us an error because it cannot find the methods as they are in a different class. So, in this case, we have to write the class name dot method name. For example, class2.myMethod1, where method 1 is within the class 2. Within class2 myMethod1, if we want to access static int number 1 that is within my class, we need to write the class name dot variable name. This is the same way as what we did to invoke the method, but here we are invoking the variable, so we can write myClass.number1. The same goes when we want to call myMethod2, where we have to write the class name, which is class2.myMethod2. And within myMethod2, to access number 1 variable within my class, we need to write myClass.number1. Let's look at the method execution flow to ensure that we fully understand what is going on when we call a method. Here we have the method called showMessage within the same class called hello2. So within the main method, it goes to showMessage and executes the statement within the method. It then returns back to the main method and executes the rest of the statement there. The arrows here shows the flow of it, from main method to showMessage, going through the statements within the showMessage, then back to the main method and going through the rest of the main method. If it calls a method within another class, within the main method, it calls class2.doIt method and goes to the method. In doIt method, it calls another method called helpMe that is within the same class, so it does not need to call the class name. It executes the statements within helpMe method, then returns to doIt method, and from doIt method returns back to the caller method, which is the main method. This flow can be represented in this code, where in class 1 main method, it calls class2 doIt method. In class2 doIt method, it calls helpMe method, where the class name is optional to be written. We can call it by class2.helpMe or simply the method name helpme. Both works the same. To summarize, we have looked at how to define and call the method with no return type, which is void, from other methods. We have also learned about the differences of local, static, and instance variables. We went through some examples to understand on ways to call the methods and variables.